Hey guys, what's up? It's Kevin for the win, and we're back for another edition of Diablo 3. Today on the channel, we are beginning our Season 25 starter sets for all the classes. We are going to start with the Barbarian, because it is one of the sets that hasn't gotten any significant changes. That being the Might of the Earth set. So let's just jump right into it. Might of the Earth. Pretty much we're going to be using a full set here. 2-piece bonus, reduce the cooldown of Earthquake, Avalanche, Leap, Ground Stomp by 1 second for every 30 Fury you spend with an attack. 4-piece bonus, Leap causes an Earthquake when you land. Additionally, Leap gains the effect of Iron Impact, and the Ruins effect and durations are increased by 150%. 6-piece, increase the amount of damage based on Earthquake, Avalanche, Leap, Ground Stomp, Ancient Spear, and Seismic Slam by 20,000%. So you're going to see we're mostly using a full set of the Might of the Earth set armor. However, obviously, we need other things to supplement its power. That being, we're going to use Guardian of the Giant. Seismic Slam increases Earthquake damage by 205% for 3 seconds. Bracers of Destruction. Seismic Slam deals 464% increased damage to the first 10 enemies it hits. We're also going to be using Traveler's Pledge as a placeholder here. Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac. We're also going to be using conventional elements to get some damage rotations going here. These are general rings that you probably want to run. Traveler's Pledge, again, random necklace because it gives us a lot of damage. Blades of Tribes, you must run this weapon. Warcry and Threatening Shout, Claws, and Avalanche, and Earthquake. Must run this weapon. For these skills, Seismic Slam, Rumble is the way you want to go here with this. Leap, Depth from Above, that way you can stun enemies as you land. We're also going to be using Threatening Shout, Falter, enemies take increased damage instead of the usual ability. We're going to also be using Wrath of the Berserker, Insanity, that way we can increase our damage even further. We're going to be using Warcry, Veteran's Warning, increased dodge chance while under the effects of Warcry. You could mix a match there if you wanted to. Earthquake, Molten Fury, that way we increase the amount of damage of Earthquake. For the passives, Ruthless, I would recommend running this. Boon of Boon Kaflos, because obviously we're going to be Earthquaking quite a bit. Earth Mighten, because we gain 30 Fury whenever we Avalanche, and Rampage. For the Kanai's Cube, the Furnace, Loot Socks, Bandamite, do not change this. If you change it, you are going to be in for a bad time. This is what my Paragon looks like. Obviously, if you're playing Seasonal, though, you will not have access to Paragon very early on. For the follower, my recommendation, very important. Really, you need a Broken Crown, but if you don't have it, Flavor of Time, Nemesis, Bracers, those two things you must absolutely run. For the ring, Crowdy's Flame, because it's a learned ring that gives you an basic passive ability. Spaulders of Zakura, anything really that you throw here is not going to matter too much. Also, for the Breastplate, Goldskin, probably your best option there. But really, you just want Flavor of Time, Nemesis, Bracers. Everything else is pretty much just throwaway for the follower. Alright, for the purpose of this showcase, we are going to be doing a Greater of 60, 65, and 70. So when you get immediately into the rift, the first thing that you are going to want to do is activate your Wrath of the Berserker to increase your amount of damage. And then you are going to start leaping around to targets. Now, when you're leaping around, there are 2 ways you can leap around. If you push the button very lightly, it is going to do a very small leap to the next target. If you hold in the button, it will do an even further leap. Now, the purpose of Leapquake Barbarian is that you want to pretty much maximize the amount of damage that you're doing with your Leapquake. So what you want to do is try to do the short leap burst as opposed to doing a very large leap, unless you're trying to gain distance for speed purposes with your Rift run. Subsequently, whenever your leap is not on cooldown, which there's ways to mitigate that, which I will be talking about shortly, you want to activate your Warcry and your Threatening Shout. Why? Because your Warcry and Threatening Shout will cause an Avalanche and Earthquake, which will do the same type of thing as your Leapquake. Everything else is basically leaping around and then going either Threatening Shout or Warcry. Don't activate your Warcry or Threatening Shout too recklessly, because if there's no enemies around, you're really not going to be able to damage things. As you can see here from the gameplay, whenever you activate your Earthquake, it pretty much leaves a molten area around, which is kind of pretty much a OE effect. So pretty much your damage rotations are going to look like leap around 3 times at an enemy, then cast either a Threatening Shout or a Warcry to cause an Avalanche to come down. Every once in a while, when there's enemies from far away and you want to get in distance, activate your Seismic Slam, which will cause a ripple effect to hit the first 10 enemies and do a lot of damage. On top of that, whenever you use your Seismic Slam, you'll be able to pretty much deal a lot of damage to enemies afar. And then basically the way you would bring back your Fury is by leaping around, because leaping does not actually burn through your Fury. However, the Seismic Slam, you're going to expend all that Fury so you could deal the maximum amount of damage to enemies. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, in terms of Fervor Optimization for this armor, what would you want to do? Well, for starters, it's very important that you get a massive amount of cooldown wherever possible. So I would recommend anywhere that you can get the maximum amount of cooldown, which is 8.0%, that you definitely do so on your armor. This will work in your benefit tremendously, because it means that the amount of time it takes you to get back your Leapquake and your Threatening Shouts and your War Cries and even your Wrath of Berserker will be almost instantaneously. So definitely make that a priority, 8.0% cooldown reduction wherever possible. Subsequently, I would recommend, since we don't really want to waste too much Fury when we do certain things, you could put resource cost reduction 8.0% where applicable. Keep in mind, though, if you can't fit it into the armor, that's perfectly understandable, because you need to also increase the amount of skills as well. Next, what I would really want to focus on in my particular build, which is what I do here, is that you want on your helm at least crit hit chance 6.0%. On your gloves, I highly recommend these free stats because they just increase the amount of damage that you do naturally. I would recommend crit hit chance at least 6.0%, crit hit damage 50%, and then I would recommend at least an attack speed of 7.0% to at least 8.0%. If you can maximize all three of those stats to their highest rolls, it works tremendously in your benefit and may be the key difference in you being able to climb 10 greater rifts higher without proper optimization and augmentation, so keep that in mind. Further down the line, things that you can do to optimize this armor further, anywhere where you can power up your Earthquake by 15%, definitely do it, because keep in mind that your Earthquake is your main source of damage, so if you're not trying to increase the amount of damage that it does, you are playing this armor incredibly wrong. Are things that you maybe want to look at subsequently if you're not sacrificing from the 15% to Earthquake, is maybe potentially powering up your Seismic Slam as well, because that's your other source of damage. And then maybe you can focus even a little bit on Avalanche, but the priority should be, that was Greater Rift 60, as you see, 3 minute and 57 second clear time, and I wasn't necessarily going super optimal with that particular run. Let's move on to the next Greater Rift, shall we, guys? Alright. Same strategy as before. You're going to want to activate your Wrath of Berserker. Then you're going to want to Leapquake around a little bit, survey the area. If you see that there's enemies around and you're not on cooldown, then you can activate your Wrath of the, not your Wrath of the Berserker, but your Threatening Shout or your War Cry. If not, you see enemies from far away, what you can also do subsequently is use your Seismic Slam, and then you would go back to leaping, because it's going to build back up your Fury tremendously fast. And those are pretty much like the damage rotations that you want to do. Always keep an eye on your cooldown of Wrath of the Berserker, that way you can increase the amount of damage. I also recommend that you save your Wrath of the Berserker sometime for elite packs, and particularly, most important, the Rift Guardian at the end, because as you go higher up on the greater rifts, they will have more HP and be able to take more hits from you and will deal a lot more damage. So keep that in mind. But also keep in mind that you want on your Earthquake 15% wherever you can in the armor, and then you kind of buff other things like Seismic Slam, etc. Anywhere where you have the choice between Earthquake and something else, you go Earthquake 15%, because that's just going to help you more so long term. Anywhere where it's like only Seismic Slam available, that's where you put 15% there. Everything else kind of throwaway, but Earthquake and Seismic Slam need definitely increases in your armor. Obviously, if you want to fully have this optimized, you want to get the maximum roll on your strength as well, but as everybody that plays Diablo free for a very long time knows, when it comes to building armors and sets and everything of the sort and builds, this is a marathon, not a race. It could take you a tremendously long amount of time before you get the rolls that you are looking for, and you might have to swap your armors quite a bit before you get what you want. Another way that you can help increase the amount of greater rifts that you're going to be able to do is by augmenting your armor. Now, if you're new to Diablo 3, augmentation your armor is easy. Basically, you need a armor or a piece of weapon or even a ring or a necklace that is ancient legendary rarity or primal ancient legendary value, and you basically then need a legendary gem that you have leveled from doing greater rift runs. I always recommend that you don't augment anything under a greater rift, basically a legendary gem that's level 80, because that's a good amount of increase to your damage that you do, about 400 to strength, because we're talking about the Barbarian. So basically you want a legendary gem that's level 80, and either ancient legendary or primal ancient legendary piece. You put it into the Kanai's cube, and you augment it, and it gives you an increased amount of damage. At level 80, it's 400. I believe at level 90, you get a 500 increase. You want to go obviously for strength, because that's what the Barbarian increases his attack stat via, so keep that in mind. So you basically want to go back and then augment every piece of the armor that way. Now, if you're new to Diablo 3 and this is your first time you were playing in a season, you get this armor as your Hadred's Gift. Your Hadred's Gift is something that you get after completing your Chapter 4 seasonal journey, where you get the full set. So basically the way it works is, starting on Chapter 2, when you complete the Chapter 2 seasonal journey, you'll get 2 pieces of your Hadred's Gift by redeeming the reward. In Chapter 3, you'll get another 2 pieces of your Hadred's Gift upon completion of that particular chapter for the seasonal journey. Chapter 4, you get the final 2 pieces. You are always guaranteed with your Hadred's Gift to get a full set of your armor, which in the case of the Barbarian is going to be this set here that you see, the Might of the Earth set. What you are not guaranteed with your Hadred's Gift is ancient legendary pieces, and most importantly, you will not be able to get primal ancient legendary pieces out of your Hadred's Gift. The only way you would be able to do that is if you opened it after you complete a Greater Rift 70, which I do not recommend, because you would be pretty foolish to do that. So the chances of getting primal ancient legendary, no, zero. It's not optimal. Not going to happen. But you are able to get the full set. So what you're probably going to have to do is, if you don't get ancient legendaries when you open them, you're going to have to obviously farm for better pieces and swap out when possible. Now, in order to fully maximize this build, you're going to have to start searching for certain weapons. My recommendation for new players to Diablo 3, particularly Seasonal Journey, is that I recommend that you do a whole bunch of bounties. That being that you're going to run a whole bunch of Nephilim Rifts over and over and over and over again. As you do more of these, and as well as you do more bounties as well, you are going to naturally run into pieces that you will need not only for your Kanai's cube, but you are going to run into certain pieces like your weapons and whatnot. And there's also a chance that you will get ancient legendary pieces or ancient set armor pieces to drop while you're questing around. So I recommend doing a whole bunch of bounties at the beginning of the season, because you're going to need a lot of materials anyway. Subsequently, after that, I would recommend doing a whole bunch of Nephilim runs, because you're going to need a whole bunch of death breaths anyway to be able to roll the stats onto the armor the way that you need to perfectly optimize it and whatnot. Also, the other benefit to doing Nephilim Rifts is that with a whole bunch of death breaths, what you're going to have access to is the ability to upgrade rare pieces of armor and weapons and everything to potentially ancient set pieces, or even ancient legendary pieces, because that comes in quite costly. For the Blades of the Tribes, generally when you're playing as Barbarian, if you're doing like a 3-hour run of Greater Rifts, and I recommend doing a Greater Rift that you're comfortable doing, where you can do it like this. There's a Greater Rift 70, 4-minute and 56-second clear time. I'll do Greater Rift 75 to show you how it does in Tournament 16 as well. Basically, what you're going to want to do is pretty much just do Greater Rift runs like you saw there. 3 to 4 minute runs. Do them for about 2 or 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours. You're going to get a lot of Paragon levels that way, so you can put in the Paragon where you need to. And also on top of that, you're going to run into like Blades of the Tribes, and you're obviously going to run into conventional elements or things that you need. Remember, you have to farm a lot in Diablo 3. There's no easy way to get things to work the way you want them to. This is not that type of game. It's, again, about the journey, not so much the destination. It's going to take you a while as the season progresses. This is not something you could speed through. My personal recommendation, Might of the Earth, as you see here, starts to see a significant drop-off rate in terms of the damage output that it can do without having it super fully optimized. So you're going to probably start seeing a wall if you don't have no optimizations by Greater Rift 80 to Greater Rift 90. This particular armor that I'm using has about 1 or 2 ancient legendary pieces augmented with a level 80 or higher gem, which allows me to push at least to Greater Rift 110 comfortably. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be fast. My recommendation for your season, especially if you're playing Barbarian, is that I would use the Might of the Earth set up until about Greater of 70. And if I haven't gotten the pieces for the Wrath of the Waste set armor, which is the Whirlwind Barbarian build, which is considered the S tier build, I would recommend you swap to that particular build and that particular set armor, as that armor relies on less optimization to be able to clear higher Greater Rifts, as opposed to Might of the Earth, where already around Greater Rift 110 without full optimization, you're going to start to struggle, particularly if you are a newer Diablo free player and this is maybe your first season. Subsequently, there are ancient legend or special gems that are going to be dropping throughout the season. So I will link you in the description to a sample build, and that will explain the special seasonal gems that are going to be available to maximize your build even further. Keep in mind that just like the special weapons of Season 24, which were the Ethereals, these special gems will only be available for the season, which is why I am not including them directly in this particular build. However, I am linking you to the sample armor build where you will be able to get that information. The reason why I don't include it in the Season 25 starter build is the fact that A, there are some people who will potentially be playing Season 25 offline, and those gems will be generally useless to them. On top of that, the reason I don't include it in the build is on the actual video is the fact that if I include it in the actual build and somebody goes to my video after the season has ended or towards the end, that information will not be applicable, which is why I leave it in the link in the description and do not include it in the video, because I know even after somebody's watched this video, they're going to ask, well, why didn't you include the gem? That is the reason why, because chances are you did not watch the video. Now, in terms of Might of the Earth, where does this land? I would say this is a solid B tier armor. It can get you pretty decently up there. It's a decent start for your seasonal journey. I don't think it's going to be as explosive as the Thorns of the Invoker set armor, because if you do that with Bombardment and you get a Captain Crimson set, something you can't include into this build because it really doesn't have the space and the workaround for it, that particular build, Bombardment Crusader with Thorns of the Invoker, is going to be able to do a lot more, a lot quicker, with a lot less optimization, so I would recommend even going with that over this at the moment. Obviously, Firebird is also a very decent set despite the little bit of a nerf, so that will probably be a little bit better of a starter build for people to start with if they just want to go to something that is potentially S tier from the start. Subsequently, you also have the Shadow's Mantle set armor, which I think can do higher Greater Rifts and has less amount of investment that you have to do to be able to climb the leaderboard higher. So Might of the Earth, I'd say solid B tier of the starter sets. Thorns of the Invoker, I would say, is very high up there in A tier. S tier, I would definitely say Firebird would be on the list. Grace of Venaris is a solid B tier as well, so it's kind of tied with Might of the Earth in terms of usage. Sun Wuku is very solid A tier armor for the Monk, so there are many more viable options that you can choose from over this particular Barbarian build. But most Barbarian players that are starting with Season 25, you will use this armor up until you get the Wrath of the Waste, and then you're going to swap out to that build. If you need a build for Wrath of the Waste, I will be covering it further on in Season 25 when I start the S tier week. I'm not going to be doing that as of yet. So you can actually check out our Season 24 builds that we have covered for that, and all that information will be applicable for you, as there have been no changes whatsoever to the Wrath of the Waste Whirlwind Barbarian build from Season 24 to Season 25. So I got you covered. Just look at one of my older builds in the playlist. Well, it's available, very easy to find, and that will pretty much be the one that you want to use going into Greater Rift 135 plus and all the way till endgame, which would be Greater Rift 150. Might of the Earth, also keep in mind, is not a very team-friendly type of armor. The fact of the matter is it's very slow compared to other builds that other players use online. Most of the time you're going to run into people using spin to win sets or stuff that goes super fast. As you can see, when it comes to Leapquake Barbarian, you have to leap around quite a bit, and it's a bit of a slower type of playstyle. So a lot of players that see a Leapquake Barbarian build in their lobbies have a high potential for leaving your lobby. So save your Wrath of the Waste for the Rift Guardian. Use your Threatening Shout, War Cry, and then Leap Quake around. You'll be able to still pop Torment 16, Greater Rift bosses fairly easily there, as you can see. And that's pretty much all there is to Leap Quake Barbarian. It's a very simple build, which is why a lot of players like it. I generally find this playstyle incredibly boring. On top of that, the playstyle leaves you very susceptible because you can potentially leap into mobs that are doing AoE effects. And if you jump into the wrong pool of acid or lightning, or the beams are up, or you jump into explosions, which this has a significant problem with its particular set armor, you will run into a tremendous amount of problems in that retrospect, which is why I don't necessarily recommend Leap Quake Barbarian for high echelon type of play for Diablo 3. With that being said, though, that's going to do it for today's Diablo 3 video. As always, a like on this video is greatly appreciated, as it helps the channel grow, and I will see you for the next Diablo 3 video. Till next time, guys.